Um, so
Ooh.
thanks, folks, for volunteering and making time to get on today. So let me open up the agenda.
Shannon, can you show the agenda, please?
It's not on there?
No,
Oh,
we're
no,
we're
you've
seeing
got-
your common. There we go. Now I'm seeing you.
Hang on just a second. How's that?
Ooh,
It's sort of there.
it's beautiful.
Perfect. So, all right, welcome and introductions. So welcome everyone. Richard, do you mind going through the list and we'll see who all is here?
I would like to.
Thank you.
Andrew Klein,
I'm here.
the chair. Charles Calvin already noted that he cannot make today. He can't make Wednesday meetings. Susan Kaufman, representing building officials.
I'm here.
Let's see, Mark Sneffen, alternate building official.
Yeah, present.
All right. Damon Jeg, home builders.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Corey Thomas, fire marshals.
Yes, present.
I guess that was fire marshal singular. Todd, manufacturer supplier.
Here.
Notice how I avoided mispronouncing your last name.
No worries. 2 more weeks, right?
Yeah, that's right. 2 more meetings. Rob Graper, structural engineer.
I'm here.
Wow, this is amazing. This is great. Chris Seaman, fire protection engineer.
Yep, I'm here.
All right. Mike Barth, special inspector and testing agent. I heard a ding, but I didn't hear. Mike, you here? All right. Oh, geez. I hope I got that right. Rodriguez, public, general public.
Yep, present.
All right. We have not only an incredible attendance, we are well over the quorum.
Beautiful.
And just a reminder, Mark, as an alternate, you don't get all the powers and privileges that come with voting, because Susan's here.
Oh, okay. Should I still attend?
Oh, most definitely. In fact, that is one of the misconceptions of the TAG, is non-members, short of voting, which doesn't occur really that often, have, basically all the privileges of membership as far as speaking and being heard. So is anybody
Hey,
in the
Mark,
general public? Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna let Mark know he's welcome also to volunteer for certain sections when we start going through that. So,
Andrew, may I ask if there's any of the general public that wishes to be recognized?
yep, that was
Okay.
next.
Hey, general public, anybody want to be recognized?
Hi, this is Al
Sure.
Spalding, Department of Health, Construction Review.
Department of Health, could you please say that again? Whomever's with the Department of Health, could you please say again?
Al Spalding, Department of
Al.
Health. I didn't see my list on the, am I going to be on the tag this time, Richard?
Do you want to be?
I thought you sent me an email saying I was on it.
Well, Al, I would like to say that this is the first time I've made a mistake, but we
Oh,
there's
no.
no credibility with that.
Uh,
I will go back through the paperwork, and the answer is yes. Let me get this fixed.
All righty. I'd love to be. That would be fantastic.
But
Thank you.
but
We'd
for
love to have
today, you don't get all the rights and privileges of voting,
Okay.
which you will see is really in title only. All right, sorry, Al. Somebody else spoke up while Al was speaking.
Well, good morning, everyone. This is Terry Beals, Regulatory Affairs Director for Sound Transit. Good to see everyone. And how are you doing, Corey Thomas? Haven't seen you in a long time.
Good. It's good to see you, Terry. Doing well. Thank you.
And Terry, you're not restricted from volunteering to take up some sections either.
No, but I am interested in some future amendments.
I'm shocked. Anyone else from the general public that wishes to be recognized?
Scott Nelson. I'm with University of Washington. I'm the building fire safety manager for the campus.
Thank you, Scott.
Kim Barker. Sorry, this is Kim Barker with the City of Bellingham, just listening in.
Hello, this is Aaron Gunsner with AMCA International Air Movement and Control Association. Just listening in. Thank you.
Hey, Aaron, this is Richard. Could you, your last name again? Sorry.
Gunsner.
Thank you.
It's a difficult German name.
Oh, then you better spell it.
Gunzner.
Aaron, I won't even tell you how far off I was. And you notice, well, you will notice with Todd that I just kind of just say Todd for his last name. Thank you, Aaron.
Certainly.
Kim Burlett, Seattle Fire Department.
Summer Riddle, City Lake Forest Park, just observing.
Andrew, I think that's it.
Thank you, folks. So let's take a look at the agenda. Any changes? Otherwise, if we can get a motion to approve it. Anyone? Bueller?
After I told all the TAG members they have no power, this requires a TAG
Sorry,
member to
the
approve
mute button
the
was
agenda in a
eluding me.
second.
Sorry, this is Chris Seaman. The mute button was hiding from me. I move to approve the agenda.
Thanks, Chris. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Sue. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. And the agenda is approved. So next, review and approve the October 15th summary minutes. If we're able to get those up, here we go. So did everyone have a chance to review those? And if so, if anyone has any changes that need to be made, please speak up. Otherwise, we'll take a motion.
I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Sue. Second.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. And the minutes are approved. Thank you.
And Andrew, this is Richard. I apologize. I should have done this at the beginning. We are having problems with these remote meetings and chat. So we actually, our intention was to turn the chat off. The problem with the chat is that we can end up having parallel conversations that don't get captured in the summary minutes. So if the chat could be restricted to, actually, I don't know what it would be restricted to. Andrew, what should we restrict the chat to? You're the chair.
Good question. Yeah, please speak up if you have anything you want to be on record. So I think you described it perfectly, right? Anything in the chat is off record.
Thank you, Andrew. Sorry for the interruption.
Correct.
So this is Sue. I made a comment in the chat for people to rename themselves if their name is not correct on their when you show up on your box. That's something I've always had to learn from Zoom meetings is make sure your name and if organization, if you want to put that on there is on, you just right click and then click rename and then rename yourself.
Thank you, Sue. That's a great idea. And also, when we review the minutes at the next time, that's actually an area I'm surprised that I don't get more comments that I have someone's name misspelled or I've omitted someone.
I think as long as it's mostly phonetic, I don't think people take too much issue. So, Richard, did you want to go over the code adoption and amendment cycle and the role of this tag?
Certainly. And this is, oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm trying to pull it up.
Oh, thank you,
One
Shannon.
moment.
And then I'll let you also go into the resources available to tag members, seamlessly.
Seamlessly. I love your optimism, Andrew. This is actually a recap, and we had an incredible attendance at the last TAG meeting also. So this was this document, was included in the last TAG meeting. So I'm really going to go through it just very quickly. June 12th, the council approved the TAG membership makeup. That would be building representatives, fire representatives, industry representatives. The model codes are now available, so that is no longer an unknown date. October 15th, we had the first TAG meeting of this group, which we just approved the minutes of. This one says in December, we'll have our first TAG meeting. I obviously should have updated that. This is our first TAG meeting addressing the 2021 code or the codes. January is where we are right now, and it's this meeting, and we will be establishing the schedule between now and March 15th. The first order of business for this TAG. I'm sorry, did I talk over someone? The first order of business for this TAG is to review the existing amendments. You will find that in each code cycle, roughly a third or more of the state amendments become incorporated into the next model code. So what we do is we go through the, and you'll see the worksheet if you haven't already. We will go through and review all the International Building Code amendments in the Group 1 code for the TAG to verify their validity or recommend changes. Again, some of them will be just simply to eliminate them. Others will be to revise the language because the model code has picked up some, but not all of them. And March, it is presented to the council. I'm sorry, it's committed to the standing committee. And what this TAG does is this TAG makes recommendations. And the voting members will vote on those recommendations. But in the rulemaking process, this is all pre-formal rulemaking process, and I'll explain that to anybody who cares. And if you don't worry about it. But what this group does is make recommendations to a small group of council members, the Building, Fire, and Plumbing Code Standing Committee. The council or the standing committee will reflect and consider the TAG's recommendations, and then in turn present their recommendation to the council as a whole. The council as a whole will be informed of the TAG's recommendation if it's different than what the council or what the standing committee made, and then will direct the staff to prepare a document with all the proposed changes recommended by the council, modified or just straight out approved by the standing committee, and then recommended to the full council. And that block of statewide amendments and the existing model code is what goes out for the public to make code modification recommendations. That window is a minimum of 20 days. And at that point, the staff will compile all, not cherry picking, all proposals received, all approved. If they don't have if they're incomplete, we will give the proponent an opportunity to finish their application. but let's just say that they leave the financial statement out, or they leave a major section of their proposal out. Upon given an opportunity to amend it and not, those will not move forward. Those will die for technical reasons. Anyway, so all proposals received will go to the council. The council will then direct the TAG to review all received. They do have the opportunity to modify the list, but my time as managing director, they have never modified the list. That list comes back to the TAG, and then this group in Ernst reviews the proposals received and will either reject them, modify them, or approve them. And that packet will then go forward to the standing committee, who again will have an opportunity to accept or modify what the TAG moves forward, and then again present their recommendation to the council. So basically, if you are a proponent and it dies at the TAG, you do have an opportunity to present that to the standing committee. If the standing committee still says no, it's gone. But if the standing committee says, let's just put it in there for the council to reconsider, then it moves forward. That is the only time you don't get 3 bites at the apple. If you're a proponent, your first bite is actually making the proposal. Your second bite is presenting it to the TAG. Your third bite, if you choose to, your third bite is when it moves forward to the standing committee. Your fourth bite is when it goes to the council. And your fifth bite is when it goes into the formal rulemaking process. You'll have an opportunity to provide public testimony on that proposal or any other proposals. And if this is not as clear as mud, I actually have this all written out, and I think the written text is better than my oral summary. Boy, Andrew, did that do it?
Yeah, I think that's good. Basically, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So if you've got a proposal and you want it in there, just keep following it through the process.
And perhaps the eye daggers of all involved.
So any questions on that? All righty. You want to discuss resources available to us, Richard, and
all right,
when they're available?
Sure. And again, this is something I presented at the last TAG meeting. And those of you that requested copies of the code, you got them. And if you don't, let us know. And this is another chance to let Shannon or myself know that you still would like a copy of the IBC. This group will meet again next month or next year for the this group 2 part of this TAG, and that is the structural portions of the IBC and the International Existing Building Code. So the IEBC we're not currently distributing, but if you want an IBC and you don't have one, just let us know if you want a PDF or hardbound.
Richard, can I let you know now? This is Andrew.
No, you got to do it in an email, or Andrew, I will lose it.
All righty.
And the complete revision history of those sections you were assigned. You'll pick sections. I don't know if Andrew's going to assign, but generally it's voluntary. You will, whatever sections you pick, staff will get you the complete revision history for those sections. But that's actually the activity that you will be involved with in the second phase of this group. This phase is the amendment phase. The second phase is the proposal phase. So that concludes that section of the minutes.
All right, thank
Or the
you.
agenda, sorry.
Any questions on resources? Perfect. So yeah, let's develop our tentative meeting schedule, which I think you showed before, right? But we'll pick out days of the week. And
no, this one's a little bit different. This is more of the summary. Shannon, if you could please bring that up.
that showing on the screen?
Yep, it is. Thank you. And what we're doing today is establishing which TAG members will be responsible for which chapters, and schedule TAG meetings from now through March 15th. I didn't edit that very well because it should be through March 14th. But anyway, having said that, what we'll do is in the next 6 weeks, get through all the IBC chapters as far as statewide amendments. And we just, so really today, Andrew, again, if this is acceptable that we meet each week, we need to pick a day. As I mentioned, Charles is not able to meet Wednesdays. So.
Well, I was thinking between Charles and Mike, we'd probably split everything up and give each half. So they're going to have to be available in future meetings.
So if that's not an incentive to make every meeting, I don't know what is.
I think based on what you sent out, Wednesday seemed to be best for everyone. If anyone has any other days they'd rather throw out, please feel free now.
This is Mark Snippen. Wednesdays are okay, but I have a later meeting at 2 to 4. So as long as we don't change the time, I would be good for it.
Okay. Anyone want to throw out a time or a day other than Wednesday? Otherwise, we'll keep it at this time and day of the week.
So that'll be 10 to 2 for the Wednesdays and the next 6 weeks. And I'll follow this up with an email to everybody.
Perfect. All righty.
That was certainly more painless than I had expected.
Yeah. So, okay, let's dig in now to the spreadsheet. Shannon, if you're able to bring that up, and we can go through and speak up if something speaks to you and you want to be, in the member, in charge of mainly reviewing it. I think we'll probably all be looking through, at least skimming through everything, but whoever is assigned to this will come with their recommendations and any comments for the tag for further discussions. So yeah, I guess we'll just go down and fill these in, what's highlighted. So this looks like what it'd be chapter 1 for the most part, authority and purpose. And
Andrew,
yep.
If I might, this is just to give you an idea of the number of amendments for each section. But what we'd like to do, and again, it's to the chair and the members' leisure. But what we like, if you agree to do a chapter as far as the statewide amendments, that is also the chapter that you will take the lead on for statewide amendments proposals. So basically, you become the TAG subject matter expert for that chapter.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. And reduces confusion too. So
yeah, and so 00 general is staff.
Oh, great. Okay,
that's the only one that's filled out, by the way.
Okay, so then down to scope and admin. Anyone want to deal with that specifically?
Excuse me, can I get a clarification? This is Mark Snippen. As an alternate, do I just follow what the person I'm covering for picks?
So my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, as an you're a voting alternate. So, you would vote if Susan is unable to make it. Your vote would count for voting officials. However, you can pick sections and be assigned to those if you'd like. or you can not choose any. So,
Okay, but I'd be responsible for, as an alternate, knowing the sections that the person I'm altering for, right?
I don't
No.
think so. No, I think you're just the alternate for voting.
Andrew, I concur. And Mark, not just you, although you are at this point the only actual official alternate. But the role of the alternate is truly just for voting. And to give you an example of how that will occur is I will come back as staff. I will come back on the 00 sections, which are really the state administrative sections. And then I will make a recommendation to unchanged or modify it in such a way. And then the voting members will either agree or disagree with my recommendation. That's the only time voting matters. Otherwise, alternates and the general public can be as vocal as they choose to be.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, and general public, feel free to volunteer also if you want to pick up a chapter. Any help's appreciated. So, any other questions before we go through chapter by chapter? And I guess just so you know, whoever's first to scream out that they want a chapter, I know that it might get contentious in that way. So be fast. So so back to chapter 1. Anyone particularly interested?
This is Sue. I'll take it if nobody else wants it really bad.
All right. Thank you, Sue.
Andrew, I goofed on 02 definitions. That should have had a volunteer.
Okay. Anyone want to look through definitions?
That will be
this is Damon. I'll take definitions if
all right,
Damon. Interested.
Thank you, Damon.
There was Andrew. There was a classic example of first speaking up didn't get it because I said staff.
So occupancy, classifications, and use.
This is Al Spalding. I'd be interested. Well, I don't think I'm officially a TAG member yet, but so I'll volunteer as a public member until I don't know how it works. I'll volunteer for chapter 3.
Thank you.
Al, I think you gathered that the tags are a little bit looser than the standing committees or the council meetings.
Okay, great. I would also be interested in chapter 4.
All right. Thank you, Al. And I don't have to ask if anyone else is interested because we already set the rules. Whoever speaks up. All right. 5, construction type. 5 is heights and areas. Building height and area.
This is Damon again. I could take 5.
Thank you, Damon. All right, 6 is construction type.
Andrew, this is Todd. This is one I could probably contribute. Todd Byrather.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know. Andrew Todd had a disclaimer, and then when he said probably contribute.
Probably.
I imagine not to set us up for failure, but I imagine some people will have things that come up, and they'll fall through to other folks. So we're all here to catch things if people need it. So chapter 7, fire and smoke protection. Yeah, fire protection engineer. Chris, you want that, or Will?
Yeah, I can. I was hoping to get 9 or 10 because then I can get one job and get double credit because I'm on the building tag as well. So.
What does anyone else want 7?
But yeah, I can take 7. That's fine.
Okay.
And Andrew, this is Will. I can take that too.
Okay, well, Chris, did you want Will to take it, or and then you can take 9?
Yeah, well, if I take 9 or 10, I can, I'm sure Corey will also be interested in 9 or 10. But if
Okay.
I take one of those, I can do it for both the building and the fire tag, and then
Okay.
one
Well,
sum of
Will,
work.
why don't we give 7 to Will then, so that Chris can double dip on the others to reduce his
Sweet.
workload.
What is Will's last name, please?
Rodriguez. Will, you want to spell it?
Yeah, it's Rodriguez, Rodriguez.
Got it.
So you have me under Guillermo though.
Yeah, Will, I'll actually change that on the roster.
Okay.
Okay. So,
And then Chris Seaman is under 9.
Yeah, unless Corey wants that one. I assume Corey's gonna pipe
Yeah,
up.
I'd prefer to take that one, Chris, if you want to
Okay,
take
yeah.
10.
Sure, sounds
No
good.
problem.
see, this is what I like to hear. People fighting everything. Okay, back to 8 interior finishes.
This is Mark Snippen. I'll take that. Start off.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
Was I correct? Corey, you're taking 9?
Yes, that's
Okay, thank
correct.
you.
And then Chris, were you taking 10? Is that okay?
Yep.
And I'd like to help you with that, Chris, if you're
Yeah,
interested.
totally. Yeah, I'm not shy from taking help.
And that's Al.
Yes, sir. With an L.
Sorry. I
Thank
need
you.
my second cup of coffee.
Only
All right,
second.
accessibility. I don't mind taking accessibility if no one else wants it.
Was that you, Andrew?
Yep, that's Andrew. All right, was anything in 11 or that was?
I thought that was
You just picked 11, Andrew.
Oh, okay. That's right.
accessibility.
Sorry. Okay, so 10 then, or 12 then now. And that was, let's see, interior improvements.
I'll take that if nobody else wants it.
All right, thank you, Sue. All right, energy efficiency. There shouldn't be too much there because it refers everything over.
Staff.
Do we need anyone there, Richard?
Staff.
I could take it
Okay.
if.
Oh, what? If somebody wants, Andrew, the reason why this is here is for statewide amendments.
Okay. Makes sense.
I don't. This is Damon. I don't mind doing energy efficiency.
Okay. Thank you, Damon.
Damon, this is Richard. I just might want to caution that this is not unlike the first week of college when you can't believe that you have such a light schedule. And then you realize what you've committed yourself to.
I don't think I'll take on any more than that, but
Okay.
I'll keep that in mind.
Just a
Good
gentle
advice
heads
going
up.
forward.
Damon, we're all here to help too. If you find yourself underwater, just speak up. We've got
All righty, thank you.
lots of folks here to help. So 14 exterior walls. I can take that too if no one else wants it.
Or I can take it too. There's plenty of stuff in there that people ask me questions about because they assume I know it. So it'd be good learning for me.
And who was
Thank
that?
you, Chris.
It's Chris.
Chris, thank you.
Seaman.
Now you'll find that 15 and several of these are darkened out because those are actually in the group 2 structural. And I'm not quite sure how we're going to handle that for the amendment process.
Is that it for, oh, there we go.
Plastics.
I'll take
Yeah.
that one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mark Snippen, I'll take that.
Electrical. Will, do you want to do that? You're an electrical engineer.
What was the chapter again? Sorry.
Chapter 27, emergency and standby power systems.
Sure, I can take that.
And that was Will Rodriguez.
Yep.
Yes.
And mechanical systems. Any mechanical engineers or I can take that if nobody else wants that.
Andrew, you do have the pleasure of assigning this to staff too, if you choose.
Well, I may wind up relying on staff, but I'll try to get through things.
Okay, no, that obviously that works for me.
And plumbing systems. Plumbing's fun. That's water's easy. It just goes downhill, right? They say plumbing's easy. Water, all you need to know, water goes downhill and cold's on the right, hot's on the left.
If only it was that simple.
Anyone?
Andrew, this is Kim Barker. If non-tag members can take it, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, thank you, Kim.
Okay.
All right, elevators and conveying systems. I guess I can take that since I'm taking mechanical anyway.
Andrew, do I have to caution you the way I just cautioned Damon?
You think there's going to be a lot more in here? I mean,
No. Again, this is working for me because if it's not you, it's going to be staff.
Okay. Special construction. This is interesting stuff too.
Yes.
I'll take it if nobody wants it.
All right. Thank you, Sue. See, encroachments into the public way. This is a nice, easy one. It doesn't really have much of anything, so you can get your name crossed off as, having it on something.
I can take that one too, because I've dealt with that in that chapter in our own city amendments.
Okay. Safeguards during construction. This one is a contentious one with all the fires and money that concrete folks are putting into things. So this could be interesting.
Andrew, I can jump in there a little bit. Todd, by Ruther.
Okay, thank you, Todd. And then reference standards, that should be relatively simple.
Oh, Andrew.
I think it should be relatively simple, but yeah, I won't.
You just jinxed it.
Yeah, I did jinx it. So yeah, anyone want a tough section? Now that it's been jinxed. This has lots of power too. All the reference standards, lots of standards organizations there that are going to try to get their stuff in there. Aaron, are you interested with AMCA in taking a section? Or do you not think that you'll be on all the calls?
Andrew, I think.
I probably shouldn't commit to doing it, if that's all right.
Okay.
I think someone was trying to speak up. I think I was mistaken. Staff? Andrew?
You know what? Let's try giving that to either Charles or Mike, and then if they don't want it, I'll take it, or if they can't do it. How's that work?
Well, I'll show up for the next meeting. Actually, though, Charles is already on record that he cannot make Wednesdays.
Right.
So, Mike?
Yeah, let's give that to Mike.
Okay.
This is Chris. I mean, even if he can't make the meeting, he could do the legwork, right? And just pass it off to somebody else, and they could present on his behalf.
That's a very good point, but it's not a formula for success to assign something to somebody who's not able to participate.
Gotcha.
What is Mike's last name again?
MERS.
M-U-R-S? Barth, B-A-R-T-H.
Oh, I was way off.
It's phonetic.
And Appendix D, fire districts. Ken, you have any interest?
This is Mark Sniffen. I'd be okay with that.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
So.
Yeah, no, thanks, Andrew, but thank you for thinking of me.
Okay. You're welcome.
That is it.
No, actually, Shannon, I goofed. We should have Appendix E also.
Damn.
No, that's my goof, not yours.
So supplementary accessory requirements. Does that resonate with anyone?
I think it would make sense for it to go with whoever took 11, not knowing who took 11 and whether or not they want it. But I mean, it would make some
Very
sense.
generous of you, Chris. 11 was Andrew.
I think I took it, didn't I?
Oh,
Yeah.
You did.
Sorry.
Andrew, you want that to be staff?
No, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
That makes sense. I was misreading that anyway. I had said supplementary accessory requirements. But yeah, if it's accessibility, yeah, that makes sense. I should take it.
And there are two more goofs. Appendix K, administrative provisions. And I guess, Sue, that would kind of be a logical link to chapter 1.
Sure, I'll take that.
All right. And again, I apologize for this form not being complete. And last but not least, Appendix N, reclamable buildings?
I think it's relocatable.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of it's phonetic.
Yeah. I guess I opened my mouth. I can take it.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Wow. Staff got off well.
Well, hey, don't jinx it, right?
Hey, I'm retiring, Andrew.
That's true. You can jinx it.
I can put as much on staff as I want.
Well, is that really the legacy you want to leave, though?
Who took the relocatable buildings again?
Chris Seaman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So I think that's everything. If anyone has.
Andrew, we actually now need to go back to number 6 and pick which days these are going to be presented at.
Ah, okay. All righty, let's
the
timeline.
What happened to my 6? So I recommend for, and what we can do, if that's all right with you, Andrew, is we could just pick the first, the week of January 24th and the week of January 31st. And then at each meeting, flush out the rest of the list. So for the next meeting, I will take, I will say chapter 0, which is,
Okay.
and now it's a bidding war for who wants to present in the next 2 weeks.
I can do chapter 11.
Okay.
Are we only reporting on the amendments this time or on the whole
Correct.
chapter?
No, only on the amendments.
Only on the amendments. The week of, assuming I can get my hands on the code in soon enough, I could do chapters 3 and 4 on January 31st.
Okay. And again, as soon as this meeting's over, shoot Shannon or me an email. And if you want PDF, we can get it to you within a day.
I already sent you one for PDF. Perfect.
All right. So we have 0 and 11 on the first week and 3 and 4 on the second week. That's really not enough.
So, Richard, can we maybe go back to the list so that we can see which ones have state amendments? Because we're only looking to present on impacts to state amendments. So there's going to be plenty of chapters that.
Sure. Chris,
don't.
there really weren't that many that didn't have them. So,
Oh,
you know,
okay. I think I volunteered for some. Haha.
you did. You volunteered for a lot.
No, that don't have amendments.
Oh.
I guess whatever the first one I volunteered for that is full of state amendments, I can do. Does that make sense? Because I forgot what I did already.
Sure. I'm looking as we go. Chris, the first one you signed up for is 10.
Okay,
Now
and that has amendments, so I'll.
That has a lot.
Yeah, I'll figure it
Okay.
out.
Do you want to do it next week or the following week?
Al, are you cool with next week if we get on it?
On chapter 10?
Yeah.
Or
you want to push it out 2 weeks?
It'd probably be better. Well, I'm just nervous because I don't have a copy. I haven't even peeked at 21 yet. So
okay, yeah. So then let's say me and Al can do the chapter 10 on the 2 weeks from today meeting.
Excellent.
What date is that? The 31st?
It's the week of the 31st, so that would actually be February 3rd.
I have February 7th.
And then
I don't know if that's no.
February 7th is a
Sunday or something.
Yeah, we're talking Shannon, the week of January 31st. I started with Sundays. I don't know why I did that, but I know why I did that. But so your February chapter 3, 4, and 10 are for February 3rd.
Perfect.
And then can you scroll to chapter 14 to see if we have amendments? And I could do that next week if we do.
14 has 2.
Okay. Yeah, I can get those prepared for next week.
Okay.
And then assuming Appendix N has 1, I think I can get that one done as well for next week.
I think that's fair.
So you can throw that on there.
Damon, are you able to do any in the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, I was just looking at my calendar. I think I can probably do chapter 2. Would that'd be next week, correct?
Okay.
There's only one state amendment. And then could I push chapter 5 out a little? Maybe do that one in 2 weeks?
Sure.
This is Kim Barker. Can I do chapter 29 on the week of the 7th or the 14th?
Yes. Which one?
We'll do the 7th.
Okay, you want 7 on 7?
Yep.
There's some poetry there. Andrew, would you entertain that people can be ready and if time permits, we could entertain their chapters even though they haven't been assigned?
Yeah, definitely.
There is a danger to that, and that is that it will not be published ahead of the meeting. Nah, I'm sorry, I don't think that's a good idea. Sorry, I just should have thought before I opened my mouth, because we want to put within the agenda which chapters are being reviewed for the public.
Okay.
Sorry.
This is Mark Sniffen. Being new to this whole process, what does it mean to review? Does that mean that you've read all the changes proposed and state amendments and had an opinion on them, or in writing?
Mark,
what do you do?
Thank you. No, that is a great question. What the intent is that you take the state amendment that's listed on this form, you compare it against the 2021 model code, and then say, yep, it's good. The 2021 model code still does not address this issue, or the model code partially addresses this issue, so I recommend the following modification to the amendment, or the model code fully addresses this amendment. That would be you, recommend that we eliminate this amendment.
Great, that helps a lot.
Yeah, and this will really come in any, for the first meeting at least, this will really come in any format that you guys are comfortable with, and staff will take the TAG's recommendation and put it into a code revision form, unless there's no potential change. And what you'll see on that spreadsheet that I gave you, that it's the TAG member recommendation. Sorry, I need to look at this. It's the first it starts with your recommendation. The next column is what the TAG as a whole agreed with. Either they agree with the recommendations that you guys just agreed to review, or they modify it. And then just comments on the right, or just additional information for the BFP standing committee when this moves forward to them.
Richard, this is Sue. I could do like whatever the chapter 1, whoever's doing the chapter 2 at the same time. I can't remember when that one was.
That's in a week.
Okay, yeah, let's just get that one paired up.
Sure. And one TAG member noted that he can go till 2 o'clock and no further. If, I doubt this is going to be the case, but if we find that we have more work to do than the time allowed, we can move what's ever left to the next meeting. Because it'll already be done for you. Okay, if you could take a look at this calendar, because we do need to flesh it out, and look at the sections that you agreed to review. And at our next meeting, which is next Wednesday, a week from today, we can flesh out the rest of this list.
Perfect. Any other comments or questions for the good of the order?
Hi, this is Aaron Gunsner, AMCA. I guess just general procedural question. Is the intent is to adopt the 2021 IBC? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then I guess follow up. I'm interested in a section that's in the 2021 IECC. I guess I'm wondering. I guess I would assume there's a separate tag for that, and they would address those sections.
Aaron, that is a great question, especially for those of you that have been involved in TAGs in the past. Is historically, we have done the full IBC and the IEBC in the group 1.
Richard, he was asking about the energy conservation code.
Oh, the energy conservation. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going existing. Thank you. Andrew, I was going to wax poetic.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't want to.
No, that's a separate tag.
Okay, gotcha.
And Aaron, there's a residential and a commercial tag for that.
Okay. Would it be appropriate for me to email perhaps you, Richard, to get on that mailing list?
Yes, actually, Aaron, that's another good point. To get council information, and I mean, I tend to err for getting more than less, is on our website on the left column on the home page. There's a way to sign up for council information. And that way you will be on the mailing list for all TAG meetings if you choose to check that box, not just this one.
Okay.
Or
Gotcha.
anything else of interest to you of council business.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. I think that answers my question. Thank you for the committee's time.
Aaron, I made that sound like it's very simple. It took me 4 tries to figure out how to do it. So if you do have difficulty signing in to get council information, please contact me. Actually, safer, please contact Shannon Pitts, and she's got this great little thing she'll send you on how to walk through the process.
Sounds great. Thank you.
You bet.
And Richard, the commercial and residential energy tags, is that this year or it's next year?
Both. The commercial is the Group 1 code, which is this year, and the Group 2 codes will start next fall, and that's the residential energy.
Okay, got that, Aaron.
Yes. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
Can I just clarify? This is Shannon. Week of January 24th, you're going over 0, 1, 2, 11, 14 and Appendix N. And then
Yep.
And then week of January 31st, I've got 3, 4, 5, and 10.
Correct.
And I don't have anything on the other weeks yet.
We have the 7 on the week of the 7th.
Okay, thank you.
This is Rob Graper. I'm sorry, I had to step out for a minute. You guys might have already talked about this, but I was all anxious to sign up for the Group B stuff. And apparently we're not doing that today.
Rob, I think there's going to be some confusion when it comes time for state amendments, because the council voted to take structural and the existing building code into the Group 2 review. So yes, currently the structural amendments and I'm sorry, the structural appendix and the structural sections within the body of the model code are going to be considered starting next fall. And I am positive the opportunity for you to volunteer then will present itself.
Something to look forward to.
Hey, Richard, this is Todd, and I forget what we talked about on the council, but that is going to be confusing, right, with amendments, especially when it relates to some of the construction type. Of course, my mind's in mass timber, but that's going to be messy.
Yes, and Todd, what I've just thought of on the fly, so you know how long I've been thinking about this, is that we will accept amendments for the Group 2 chapters and appendix. However, we won't consider them till next fall.
So okay, yeah, that
Because
makes sense.
I
They
agree
should
with
all
you.
be submitted at once early on for consideration later.
Well, no, I'm sorry. I'm thinking more. It'd be too confusing to the general public to try to parse it out. But we will, if we get something, we'll carry it over. But we'll also open up the opportunity for those sections again next fall.
Okay, oh, that makes sense. Okay,
because I could see myself as a proponent thinking, well, I submitted this.
right.
All right. Any other questions, comments? You've got 3 hours.
So we're going to get this updated spreadsheet with the names of everyone on here. Is that correct?
Well, it is now, Sue. No, that was the plan.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
If anyone has questions or concerns, you can always contact me. I won't volunteer staff, but I would assume, they're available as well if you have any questions or concerns. So, okay, anything else? Any other comments or questions before we adjourn? All right. Well, again, thank you so much. Thanks everyone who volunteered. Thanks everyone who made time to join in the meeting. And, it should be a fun process moving forward. So, we'll adjourn. Richard, we don't need a vote to adjourn, do we?
Correct.
Okay, good. I'm not sure it would pass anyway. So excellent. Okay. Bye, folks.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yep.
Thank you for the information. Take care.